Alrighty, welcome to another edition of the Magus Talk podcast. Today, Jay has gone to Arizona and he's sending us his experiences, his thoughts, his communiques. And what we'll be doing is letting Jay talk, and then I will interject on occasion to elaborate on what he's saying, because if I give you the whole spiel and then reply, it's going to be hard to correlate one thing with another. So it's not quite a Q&A session, but at least you'll know what's going on. And because we're dealing with something quite interesting and quite advanced and quite unscripted, by the way, because I don't know where it's going and I don't know where his experiences take him, but I do know how to interpret them. So take it away, Jay. Let's see what's going on in the far out west of the US of A.
Alrighty then. Take two, because I had to delete the first audio recording that I sent. So anyway, to let everyone know what's going on, as well as you, Ari, is I am in Arizona, outside of a little town called Quartzsite. Well outside that town, actually. About an hour and a half into the mountains at an old mining town. And it's so far out of the way, I couldn't resist myself. I had to go. And here I am in the middle of the desert with not a soul around. So anyway, I was heads up enough to record some dreams in the earlier this week, because if I had not have recorded these dreams, I would have very little to talk about. But I just listened to them, and I'm very tempted to just let you guys listen to me talk after I just woke up with, it's just so honest, but it's like too honest. Names were given out, and I don't want to do that, but it was entertaining, to say the least, listening to me, come out of a coma pretty much and start talking about dreams. But anyway, okay, before I get into these dreams, there's a lot of synchronicity. But let me just say that, Ari, I did not have a lower back injury. I know that the sound bite that I sent, I jumped back and forth, but I have had numerous low back injuries, but this was not a lower back injury. It was in the middle of my back, and it was where the lungs are. And it was, just knotting up something fierce. It was affecting the way I stood, breathed, spoke, sang. It affected everything. Okay, now that is gone, but not before some other internal stresses also came about as well. Just different places in my chest where, okay, things are being shifted around, and there's no other way to look at it. And I felt this before. And of course, I say there's no other way to look at it. There's probably 1,000 different ways to look at it. But at any rate, I've felt this kind of thing before, and I associate it with just internal physical shifting of things. And that's just kind of par for the course from time to time when you're like, because I'm doing the genie work, but I'm also doing some Kundalini stuff as well. So with the 9 cuts. So anyway.
All right, Jay, thanks for the clarification. Now, before I get into the real reasons for this, let's go into some of the psychology of it. I happened to just look it up a little bit. And it's really funny because it says people with back pain are usually suffering from mental disorders, depression, anxiety, and then they tell you you have to quit smoking and blah, blah, blah because of breathing issues. And it also says that stress and hunching of the shoulders and all of this. But it doesn't give you a deeper layer. It just says that mid back pain, well, any back pain, but mid back pain specifically has to do with the diaphragm and the breathing. So, chi, and guess where your genies are? They're in the internal alchemy phase of conscious breathing, of chi, of pranic generation, the so-called air element. Um, Even though and this element has to do with everything and all the modifications that you've sensed. So, yeah, there is strain and stress, but at the same time, it's pointing out where it existed. Let me explain it in a different way that kind of bridges the gap between psychology and esotericism. What I mean is that you do have issues and you are in distress and you are aware of this vampirism going on, and there are things going on in your subconscious that are straining you, just like a virus strains us. It's not like strain, oh, it's a little bit of resistance. This is more like something debilitating, a blockage, a toxicity. And so this strain, this psychic immune system response, in order to resolve this, there's an overflow. So the body mind can only handle so much. Now that's why we do cultivation in the first place. We do it in order to increase first the resilience of our psychic immune system, the energy body's filtration dynamics, and second, in order to upgrade our capacity to interact with the world and circulate more of life, because right now we're so strained that if too much life comes through, it hurts. So we got to relax, but this isn't a muscular relaxation, so it's really hard to correlate. We need to relax the mind, but not in a way that you're hypnotized. So we need to relax the relationship between the body and the mind. And this way, this is part of what this massaging is doing, because you're taking the psychic issue and you're making it a physical issue. And sometimes you take the physical issues and you can make them into psychic issues. They are intertwined. In other words, for example, you have an issue in a relationship and you're anxious or fearful or angry, and this has nothing to do, and you're physically fit. Well, eventually that's going to overflow into the body because it has to process it, because the body and the mind are one. The body can't just go off on its own and the mind in a different direction. You're going to end up with a schizoid state because the body's going to want to maintain its equilibrium. It doesn't want the negativity of the mind. Now, if the things are reversed like they usually are with spiritual bypass or being ungrounded, um, then you have the mind, and that's pretty common, in fact, because mind over matter. The mind goes, I don't want to deal with this. So, well, I'm sorry, you're pushing it into the subconscious. The body is in the subconscious, it's the foundation of it. I mean, the deeper you go into the subconscious, the deeper you get into physical essence. So, if the body is afflicted and the mind doesn't take care of it and skim off the top, so to speak, as much as it can, and intentionally move to harmonize that, well, the body is going to be overwhelmed and you can get chronic diseases, you can get accidents, and all of this, of course. So in your case, you do have both going on. There's friction. Let's put it another way. The issue, and I may be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but still, it correlates with what you're saying before you get into the dream. So we'll see how it comes back. The issue is that you have this conflict with vampirism on the one hand and not wanting to blame anybody on the other, which is commendable. So, and also you don't want to throw all those years of work in that relationship um, out the window by saying, oh, nothing's happened. It's still the same old, same old. No, it's not, because of course you're at level 3. But when you switch levels, and sometimes people switch levels between 1 and 2, that's not that uncommon. We're dealing with our own issues, but nobody is an island. So you deal with issues of relationship, and eventually we reach a barrier where psychology cannot really cross, because you would have to admit things that you can't see, hear, taste, or smell. You can feel them, but not with your sense of physical touch. Still, things that affect you, but that don't translate logically, so to speak. So these things need to be incorporated. The body and the mind are not fused into a single thing in the human condition. That's part of the human condition. Whereas other biological species, for example, whatever awareness is there is in synthesis, even primates with the mind aspect. The mind is an extension of the body, more than humans. In humans, the mind and the body form like two ends of a dumbbell. And the part between them can get very, very frail and thin. And then you have dissociative issues. You have alienation, you have hatred, you have destruction, you have health issues. You may be overbalanced in one direction. There are so many people who are super healthy and they're psychopaths. Now, how is that? Well, because the body can take care of itself and the psychopath make sure that no other negativity infiltrates it. They take care of it. They project their hatred elsewhere, in other words, and the body doesn't get any. It's not that they love the body, they just leave it alone because they want to survive. In the same thing, there are people who are very body oriented and dedicated to their physicality, and they do love the body. That's a different story. They may not get physically sick, but they may get psychically ill. They may have issues in relationships. They may have stress, more stress than other people. We'll get into all of this in the future because the Jinn progression, as far as I'm concerned, is going to bring them up. Right now, your reorganization is the lungs, but it's also the diaphragm. The diaphragm is very, very important because it regulates the relationship between your chest area and your abdominal area, aside from the oxygen and the life force and all of that. But the yin organ of the lungs is above, and this paradoxically drives the motion of the large intestines because it, and the small, because it kind of, as you breathe, it constantly massages blood into it. So deep breathing is healthy and abdominal breathing is healthy for that reason, of course. But in your case, your breathing is connected to the sadness that you feel, the grief that you feel, that things seem to be, you know, coming around like they were in levels one and two. And maybe these things with the relationship that you have with this individual who can be of any gender, because it's not a sexual relationship or anything, or an intimate one. This is, very good acquaintance, shall we say. In any case, this relationship is meant to be resolved. And that's one of the pitfalls that many humans have in their cultivation because they see things cycling back and they don't understand that they're just at a different level of dealing with it. So you spiral through it. You don't just dump it and go. If only it could be that easy. But it's not that easy because we're using these conflicts in order as resolution keys or access keys to deep levels of being that require transmutation, healing, redemption, and remedy. They require that golden awareness that you start cultivating with the inner smile, for example, or through heart breathing, or just by being empathic and the whole idea of the loving puppy or the loving kitten, and all of that, the warm and fuzzy that the many people I consider psychopathic make fun of, because warm and fuzzy is really where everybody wants to be. So, hey, but allegedly life is tough, so you got to toughen up. Well, you got to keep that warm and fuzzy inside of you because that's what's going to heal you, okay? And it's just the beginning. It gets a lot warmer and a lot fuzzier, but in a comfortable way. This is how the body feels health. I mean, the whole maternal connection, the embryonic connection, the being in the womb type of thing is basically okay. My boundaries are down. I don't need to be, my individuality is probably the least it will ever be during my whole life because I'm kind of bonded with the mother when I'm in an embryonic state and everything is taken care of. But it's more than that. If the mother is a loving environment, then I become a loving individual. That's how I grow. Unfortunately, traumas rebound and alienations and things like that. So, and that's another topic, of course. But we'll include it interspersed in these discussions as we go along. The funny thing is, I I actually was, how do you say, I was Googling, I hate that word. I was Googling, looking up the psychology of back pain. And the big article that came out, like in big letters on the Google list, was how to heal back pain in Arizona, where basically their healing center was or something. But I was really fine. I was like, oh, I should be actually putting this in then. So, in any case, the lungs represent unresolved grief, which represents unresolved letting go. Unfortunately, letting go, let's put it this way, you have connections to all these people, and you've lowered the intensity of those connections. You've created filters so you can manage the situation, but those filters are level one and level two. Now, what does that mean? That means that, well, this individual consciously is happy with you and doesn't need to do the extreme vampirisms or whatever to get your attention or to survive. He's happy in the environment. He's satisfied with the situation. The collective that's been taking dividends off of his vampirism of you and distributing J NFTs around and stuff and little J bits to those who want them. Um, he's he's not happy. The collective is not happy and it wants its own cut. You've managed to decrease that to something manageable. You haven't severed the cords. You're still feeding your relationship. You're still feeding the situation. And part of the reason that the other party is content is because you're still feeding the situation. And they're in a condition where the collective isn't going to corrupt that. So it's sustainable. I'm not saying it ain't, but if you're going to go to level three is already on your case, which means this: if you're going to get beyond the environment you're in and have more freedom and more prosperity, shall we say, and maybe something more meaningful. Not that it's not meaningful already; it's very meaningful through what you're doing. But I mean, where you actually find a contented level of well-being that has no issues, and then you can claim your empowerment and do whatever you want to do, whatever inspires you to do. That's genuine, creative, or however you want to do it, you will succeed. But this cannot happen when you have half your energy taken out. So you're saying, well, I'm happy with that. That's fine. I can be where I am as long as everything is in harmony. Well, when you do the dragon gin, when you do the gin work, as we have it, it goes into your subconscious and goes, well, you don't seem to be that happy, and maybe you can sustain your mental contentment, but slowly you're going to develop a physical breakdown that's going to escalate by the time you're 70 or something, and it may not kill you off the bat, but you won't have the resilience to deal with even deeper crises because that collective ain't going to give up. It's a greedy SOB. And male, female, and I say male because spirit has that kind of yang quality, which is associated with maleness, outgoingness. The usually the male aspect is the one that radiates outward, and the female aspect is the one that receives. So we're speaking archetypally, folks, not personally or not psychologically. We're really speaking archetypally. Um, so Jay, you have this grief about it, and but it hasn't affected your processes yet. It's almost like you're holding your breathing in check. You're holding your breath in anticipation for what else is going to happen. So you're caught in the middle almost between your own unwillingness to take a step in your relationship and your grief that you're actually paying such a high price for it. Now, the reason for that is because there's lack of insight here. There's lack of consciousness because it's still working through. You're going to find the solution. But like you said before, Ari, if you have something to add, then do so over here. Maybe you can save us some time and effort. And as a matter of fact, I do have a few things to say, and I won't extend this long. It's just that um, As you move on, you can sever the connections with the collective and still maintain a circulation with your relationship in that particular case. Uh, you can still talk to these people and deal with these people and expand, but you're going to have to understand that as you move along to greater and greater whatever you want to do, as your bliss takes you along, there's going to be a sense of resentment and maybe competitiveness and maybe a little bit of jealousy that inspired the vampirism in the first place. Again, this is not the person per se, because you can see, oh well, they're fine, they're whatever. Yeah, but when you have a situation where the collective is now crapping on this person to get them motivated to be more desperate and get more energy, especially in a scenario where your success eventually, relates to them, since you're that close. So your success basically is something that they do want, but only if they benefit from it, because they know that alone they could never do that. Whereas you have a certain natural charisma that is coveted in a way, a certain sincere connection, a certain once you I guess I remember like in the old days you used to talk about the Beastmaster movie, the guy that was friends to all the animals and stuff. So it's a kind of shamanic quality, and some people have it. But you got to know that there's other people who feel they don't, and are open to the collective enough, because the perks they do get in life, whatever they have in life, the conformities, those are also made with a kind of collective bargaining. There's all kinds of dynamics in the subconscious that are going on at level three that, you know, uh, people speak about these things, but it's hard to discern them. Often they confuse them with the personal relationship level. And it's very hard for modern humans to process what this means, even though the New Age movement has tried to wrap its head around it. But here we're going to have some personal experience, and through that personal experience, we're going to talk. So the takeaway here is that you can resolve this. This is not an unresolvable issue, only, and you don't need to keep the cords alive and sustain other people to do this. Because what you do need to do, which is far more advanced and difficult, but this is why the genies are here, is to sever this individual's tie with level three. Now, that has another form of consequence, because then the perks he's getting, the support he's getting in his life, generally speaking, is basically, uh, how do you say, it's going to be gone. They're going to feel stress that they didn't have before. And then the voice is going to come in and say, well, it's that guy's fault. If Jay just pulled his own weight, and did his own thing, or, gave me what I want. And I've seen this over and over again. And when I try to explain people this kind of thing, I don't care who it is, cold, there's a strong resistance. And some people eventually come around, as long as it's not too personal. Once it gets personal, you're going to have to expect resistance. So there was a lot to unpack here. And I don't think I'm going to interrupt much more, because I do tend to try to complete the information sequence here when that happens, to round out the idea. So, Jay, just continue knowing all that, continue with your dream, because you're going to be moving into a zone where your breathing can release, where your diaphragm can release. And so the energy that's coming up through the solar plexus from your lower elixir field as you do the fusion alchemy and things like that can actually truly purify those emotions. You have the fusion alchemy. If you feel emotional strain, use it. Emphasize the cleansing part so we can move into the virtue part. And as you move into the virtue part, you'll have resources in order to deal with this. You'll have more clarity as well, because interestingly enough, especially for you, but I would recommend it for everybody. When you do this kind of work, fusion alchemy is important because it's a very deep therapeutic method. Because it not only purifies the negative emotions, it it helps heal the organs and convert all the energies that your organs naturally generate and store into positive strengths and virtues. And thus the body mind is in the connection is stronger. You don't have that dumbbell effect. It becomes, excuse me, like it needs to be. Just a slight bulging at the extremes and a slight narrowing in the middle. Not like an infinity sign that has to go through the same point. It's not so singularity like. So, anyways, um, you're going to be able to circulate energy more and open up more. Call this not some major issue or the last issue, but is a key. If you can harmonize the situation enough, and it's a creative act, it's not like, okay, let's snip this at the bud, let's pull this out at the root, let's do this. No, this is this is brain surgery, okay, but in a way that's intuitively doable. It's like having a really complicated app with like a I'm recording now, okay? So the mixer, the little audio signal is waveform is moving forward, and the interface is intuitive. It's what if it's so intuitive that it's effortless? That'd be great. It'd be like moving your fingers and just expressing naturally, and poof, you're being creative thanks to the software. Now, that's what you want, because your intuitive side is going to take all of this that I'm explaining and go, yeah, okay, now I get it. It's obvious. It's obvious because it's instinctive. Because just like you can go to the bathroom because you got the organs for it. You can actually come up with the truth because you've got the interconnection, the neural structure for it. Let's call it that way. In any case, continue, please, with the dream. I'm really interested to hear about it.
A girl named Yuki, who I know really well. She's a girl I met in Japan. And Yuki, by the way, means snow. So anyway, Yuki is driving a car kind of at the same time this vampire is also trying to drive the car, and I'm in the back seat. And it's down a snowy road, and I know this road well because I broke my collarbone on this road and separated my shoulder in that same accident on a mountain bike, and I almost fell off this cliff that I'm thinking about right now. And we were on that same road, or at least a road that really looked like it. And it was a snowy road, and said vampire was flipping out, really wanting to drive. And Yuki had, right now, the vampire is like he's just out of control machine at this point. I mean, there's just no reasoning with him whatsoever. And he's smashing, or said vampire is smashing Yuki up against a window, and the vampire, she is trying to drive. The vampire will switch from male to female, by the way, because I'm keeping everything as nebulous as possible. Because this person isn't a bad person. They're just part of the story. So anyway, the vampire is like losing his mind completely, and Yuki's really angry because all she's trying to do is just drive down this road, which, it's a little risky. It's slippery. She had never driven in snow before, but it's not that big of a deal. Now, Yuki also changes back and forth into a cat. Now, this cat is a white and gray cat. Looked a lot like the cat that my ex-wife rescued, and who my ex-wife is also Japanese, and she rescued this cat, and this cat stayed with the family a long time after my ex left America and went back to Tokyo. So anyway, so this cat is involved, and I know there's a lot of yin energy involved as well, because we got like my ex-wife's cat, we've got Yuki, who's a super good friend of mine, by the way, and I see her every time I go to Japan. She's just a great girl. But anyway, in the dream, she got insanely pissed at said vampire, and doesn't ever want to talk to him again or talk to her again or talk to it again, whatever, you know. And so that was pretty much the end of the dream. But the cat, oh no, the cat was also super angry. Now I know that Ball is a cat as well as a frog and a human. But I think this cat may mean a little more than just Ball. Maybe, I'm not really sure. And it's not a white cat. It's that same. It's the cat my ex-wife rescued. So, and I wrote notes. Okay. So before this dream, I got in a fight with the vampire in another dream, and he broke my nose, and I broke his nose. So at least I thought. So okay, we're even. And so the fight was over, except that I figured out that I didn't break his nose, and so I, you know, wanted to continue fighting until I could even the score. So that happened before the dream that I just talked about, I think. I don't know. Like I said, I was just slipping out of a coma when I recorded these dreams, so I'm not really sure. But then there was another dream about me and the vampire was taking care of my dog. Now, my dog is, he's no longer with me, and I got to be real careful or I'll start crying. And said vampire, this person is good with animals, but just weird for some reason, in life, this vampire never really liked my dog. And, it could be because, and it's just very strange because this vampire, even at the height of vampiric happenings, was never just openly mean to an animal. And he wasn't really, the vampire wasn't really openly mean while my dog was alive, but I could just tell she did not like the dog. And she liked female dogs. She didn't like male dogs. My dog was a male dog. And so anyway, but in the dream, this vampire was helping me groom my dog, doing a better job than I could do. And I'm like, okay, awesome, thanks for the help. And then we ended up being on a boat in this dream. But the boat people were uncomfortable with me grooming said dog on the boat. And I had to take the dog to a separate boat, or maybe a separate section on the boat. Like, think of it as kind of like a pontoon, but not exactly. I don't know. But anyway, I got to this certain area, and then it was okay that I groomed my dog, and it just, and dog hair was also a part of the dream as well. And this certain vampire used to hate dog hair coming from my dog. Now, this vampire has owned dogs before and took very good care of the dogs. And those dogs, as I recall, had dog hair as well. They were much bigger than my dog. My dog was like a little beagle. And the vampire never had a problem with that dog, those dogs and their dog hair. Only a problem with my dog hair. Now, this is in real life. I know I'm kind of switching back and forth between dream and reality, but it was just a bizarre situation that, some of this I can figure out, but other parts I cannot. So anyway, those are the dreams.
Before you go on, let's look at these dreams that you've had. Now, from what I see, and I've had to take notes this time, there's three of them. And in Japanese tradition, certain snowy mountains, they have these yokai or female like goddesses, something between a goddess and a demon, a spirit that essentially is the spirit of snow. And men dying of exposure, for example, would see visions of, a beautiful woman come to take their lives, or the ones that survived probably spoke about it. But this is a true thing. And cats have to do with spirit. The cat is like a familiar, okay? The witches familiars and all that. So remember in the last piece when I spoke, I talked about the Beastmaster archetype that you had mentioned before. So essentially, you got these familiar spirits that, shamans would have and benefit from and stuff. And these would be like alliances, and they can go for, technically, if you believe in past lives, it goes beyond one life. So this Yuki, a shaman might say, okay, that is a kami, that's a goddess. It's a local goddess of snowy mountains, but it also has a metaphoric aspect because in your psychic and psychological encounters, sometimes things are slippery, dangerous, so life threatening, you might say, or maybe anxiety provoking. So this goddess, this essence, this intelligence is not, however, it's related to real snow and the Japanese one. It's something that connects. And it may be that during your time in Japan, you subconsciously befriended a spirit like this because of all the good relationships you've had and all of this. And this spirit has become a protector. It may be associated with the cat or not. What matters is that your own mind has accessed this, and the spirit is with you, and it is apparently practically real because it is, and it's not a jinn. This is separate. This is something the jinn have brought to the surface, probably, yeah, more, because it seems to have been like repressed or hidden. Maybe the vampire is like, just like the vampire doesn't like your dog, he doesn't like your cat, even if it's a spirit cat, because this cat is in charge of your own subconscious processes when you're moving through rough patches. It takes over, so you keep going. It may give you a fortitude. It may make you prevent mishaps. It may do many things, but it is on your side. And in my honest opinion, it's very real. It's not like some psychological symbol of an abstract process. So you do have a kind of female familiar goddess, it's connected in that way because of the polarity. So the fact that your wife had rescued a cat and, it has this aspect, the cat itself could have a spirit, and the spirit it's chosen you as its protector. Let's put it this way. So this cat, and these protectors, sometimes they appear as animals, sometimes they appear as people, sometimes both. They're in the traditions. They're not something, I'm coming off the top of my head here. So the point is that this vampire in your life wants to take over your subconscious. And this, again, you do emphasize that this is a good person, et cetera, et cetera. But we need to know here, and this is very important because we all have resistance against this. Nobody likes to berate other people for no reason, especially when they're close. You don't want to like vilify anybody. You don't want to come off as if everybody else is an a-hole or something. Or even, especially if you like come off of you really care about somebody on whatever level, and they disappoint you, or you find out that they have something you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And there's a reason for this too, because as the one who is more aware, and this is not, look, this isn't tooting anybody's horn or playing superior here. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are big, some people are small. Okay, those are physical dimensions. There are also psychic dimensions. There are levels of psychic maturity, so to speak. Psychic maturity is inherent. Call it genetic if you like, call it past life, call it whatever you want, but it is inherent. Okay? And it doesn't protect you from corruption all the time. So just because you have psychic maturity doesn't mean that you're not going to have a fall and become just as bad as the immature. The difference is that you got no excuse, or far less of an excuse. Everybody has a reason, but it's like your reason is one thing. You really can't justify it as much as the immature soul. However, the immature soul it may be intellectually mature, it may be emotionally mature, all of these things, but if it's not for psychically mature, and I use the word psychic in the sense of soul, It's like the Greek word for soul. So psyche is your genuine individuated nature. I'm not saying spirit because that is consciousness that's like the body. It's not your center. Your center of you-ness is your heart. And I'm not talking about the physical heart. I'm talking about the full uh, axis of your being. It's more like your heart of self. Just because you've come into psychological harmony with said vampire, emotional harmony, physical harmony, even spiritual harmony, doesn't mean that there's something else going on that is still toxic to your own soul or the potential of your soul. Because in my explorations and observations, I've come to a conclusion that not everybody has a souls are like seeds, okay? They call it like the divine spark within us. And if that spark becomes a flame, then it's an individuated soul. But sometimes the spark doesn't go beyond a few sputters. It needs time and it needs to consume experience. That's how the flame experience is basically what feeds the flame and life force and love, because the flame is not going to be awakened in a individual with fragmentation, resentment, and hatred unless the flame itself purifies it as it goes along, and that's called the alchemical blackening, where your own psyche just gets all of the stuff that can be evaporated gets evaporated and it just turns black. But that black is still holding on to toxicity that needs to be further purified. That's just the first stage that just brings everything. And what you do is you strip the veneer off of things. You just strip it off and you see things for what they are. And that can be disappointing, not just because you're disappointed, but you can be disappointed in yourself. So being judgmental is very unhealthy as the soul matures, and at the same time, evaluating with coherent discernment, basically seeing things as they are and evaluating them accordingly in a healthy manner. We need that. We can't just throw that out the window because we can't tell the difference. So we need to be able to tell the difference. Now, I'm not saying that I am an old soul and all of this, whatever. I am saying that some people have greater stability in their individuality than other people. And it doesn't mean who looks good and who's comfortable and who has money or who has luck. And, that's got nothing to do with it. Sometimes the ones with a more coherent individuality suffer more because they don't make deals with the devil. Or sometimes they make deals with the devil and they're the ones that have the conversion experience, for example, the reborn experience, because they've actually managed to use the intensity of those dealings because they never let go of their truth at a deep level to burn things away. And then they experience, a Christian epiphany that's really deep experiences an influx of Christ consciousness. uh, Regardless if it can ground. In the Bible, there's a parable where a farmer sows seeds and sometimes he sows them on fertile ground, but a lot of them escape and whatever takes root. So it's almost like that's how we are in some way, that the soul needs fertile ground to take root. But every single spark has a purpose. Every single spark is a direction of an exploration of a probability or spectrum of probabilities, even a world. Every single spark, if it grows in the proper way and in a healthy manner, becomes what you might call a god. Right now, the gods are not born yet. They are only dreaming of being born. These gods that are worshipped are often corrupt forms or limited forms of the dreams of the real gods that are working through individuation. They're devas, shining ones, spiritual emanations and stuff like that. They're entities on a different dimension and different planes. And some essences can actually converse with human beings, as your Yuki dream shows. Spirits. They're not quite, big gods over cosmic expanses and stuff, or even principles like Greek gods, or even the devas of India, which are actually spiritual, principles themselves, and the Egyptian gods, and all of these stem from mystical experiences. But the complete manifest God is coming through humanity individuating with the emergence of the divine spark growing into a garden or the so called divine kingdom. Now, that digression aside, see, the dream itself holds much depth because you're at level 3 here. Here, you have to realize now, why would this vampire who is really getting enough start getting so desperate? And the reason is because you're expanding. You've been expanding for a while and coming to terms with this because, like you said, this is the last vampire of my life. Yeah, the last one that's in there. The other ones you would have to invite again, and I don't think you're going to do that. Invite through the threshold of your being. So, but this woman here, this vampire person, is getting desperate because there's collective pressure. There's collective pressure because it goes way down the line into the hell zone where that pressure comes from. At the same time, there's evolutionary pressure on your part to be able to cultivate that spark. And part of that means that there's a level that I'm doing now in my esoteric survivalist videos, and it's about the alchemy of internalization. In order to be able to move into true inner transformation without stress, you need to confront your own integrity. And your integrity needs to go both ways. When somebody is screwing you over, you do not just let it happen because it's not good for you, but it's not good for them either. This boundary confusion, especially between somebody who is psychically more experienced and another one who is psychically less experienced, so their reactions are more instinctive and they can be manipulated through subconscious avenues, shall we say, and they have obsessions. Now, there's the immature soul, shall we say, and then there's also the corrupt soul. However, this collective influence is slowly eating away. So that's why it's important to at least filter it out because you got to keep that out. Once you can keep it out of yourself so it doesn't smell you, let's say, this energy like Salos goes out. Who wouldn't want that? Come on, you get free Salos energy, free energy to make anybody of any gender to just completely feel busy around you or feel, for whatever reason, whether you want to convince them to buy something or whether you want to have sex with them, it's it's an energy that a lot of people wish they had. And if they can sense it in you and have the habit of being able to siphon off such things, it will happen. Not only that, but you understand that nobody can just siphon off energy. That's like downloading a program into memory that is already taken over. They got to delete something. Whatever they take from you, they got to delete from you. And then they got to replace it. Otherwise, it's going to reach out and just pull it right back from them because it's yours. So that's why it should be easy to be able to take it back as long as we go through what we need to do. In this case, guilt comes in. A lot of other things come in. Not wanting to rock the boat, fear, being intimidated in a way that through subconscious channels. Everything you experience in level 2 and level 1 is going to shift to level 3 and more intense. The difference is you're more capable of handling it. The challenges get greater, but you get stronger and more capable and more mature, so they're not so challenging. Every sincere soul wants to be done with the hatred because it's toxic. And then once I was in the car and it fucking went off a cliff. And when it went off a cliff, the next day I crashed it, the real car. In any case, the car represents your vehicle. It's your astral vehicle that's connected to the physical. So it's the bridge between, let's put it this way, if your soul heart is at the center of the dumbbell of your being between physical and spiritual, then the cylinder around that is the physical, the dumbbell isn't just a little point, it'll break. So you actually have like a bulge on either end connected to like a cylinder. Well, that whole part is your astral body. That's your energy body. And then you have the physical body on one end and the spiritual on the other, and they meet in the center, and you are aware of them as meeting because you're an individual. If you de-individualize, if you become more collective, more cosmic, more spiritual in that sense, you'll polarize toward one end, and the physical will be farther away. But when your energy body is farther away, I mean, we're closer to the Jinn than we think. The energy body connects us to the world. Our soul is wrapped in an energy body before it's wrapped in a physical or even a mental one. But the mental one is and the physical are deeply linked. So when you physically decease, your energy body unravels from the physical, and then the spirit unravels from the energy body. So as this goes along now, your dream is basically something is fighting over your astral body. And it's fighting not to control your physical or mind, it's fighting because it's feeding on your very soul. Because when it feeds on your soul, it wraps that energy of soul familiarity around its own emerging individuality. And so it feels stronger, better, luckier. It's learning basically. Some people do this consciously, okay? It's almost like mentoring an immature soul because it's connected to you, intimate on some level, and you mentor it maybe for more than one lifetime to help him along. And sometimes it's an intimate relationship, sometimes it isn't. So she's dependent on you. But even so, it's time to release the bird from the nest. And this all happens to be happening at a time when your awakening can actually make a big difference. You happen to be at a crux of evolution where you're saying, okay, it's time to bring back all the shaman abilities and then take it further, update it, and move on and go where all of these, relationships in the past that are demanded that I be less than I am. It's time to release them. And you've done it with most. This does not have to be a physical release, though. As long as you can create a filtration dynamic where, but you will be responsible for this individual in the sense that they may not, you know, really take kindly to what they feel is a justified source of nourishment, spiritual, psychic nourishment. It's like a mother getting the baby off of the breast, or weaning it off, and the baby not wanting to let go and just biting hard. It'll grow teeth and it'll still be on the breast. It'll become an adult and it'll still be on the breast. It'll grow old and die and it'll still be on the breast. And the mother is, you know, a more mature soul, a nourishing soul, one who is, let's say, immortal. So that'll be the experience. You go through cycles and cycles of this kind of weird dependency, and then you go, why? Guilt doesn't have to be stomped on and rejected. But once it's released, you see there's a lot of fear. What happens when I release guilt? I'll be as bad as, the worst. And no, that's not true. Only if there's repressed dynamics that you're denying. If you're in denial, yeah, maybe. But you're not. And it's very hard to be in denial when you don't want to be. Life will actually accommodate you very easily to show you what you're not facing. And sometimes subconsciously we cry out, I can't take this, but I don't know what it is. Life will hear you and reflect to you what's going on, whether you want to accept it or can accept it or not. But eventually, there's going to be a back and forth where you will accept it if you want to move on. Because once a soul is beyond a certain point of awakening, there's no going back. Then you have to go through the original trauma that created individuality in the first place, the original alienation from the divine, let's say. So the true individuated essence can blossom from a center outward. That's why in this work the soul is yang and the environment is yin, because it forms a battery and that battery creates a current, and the Tao can actually move between the macrocosm and the microcosm. That's the human element. That's why all of these cultivations they ask for, well, you need to become more yang, more towards spirit. But that doesn't mean releasing the body. That means bringing spirit into physical manifestation as the body, creating a continuity. This dream you had about him punching you in the nose, you want to give back that karma. And you want to do it, your shaman self, your deeper self would want to do it because, well, this person can't get away with it because if they do, that's all they'll know. You cannot reward immature souls for what you might call compromised behavior, even if that behavior is being instigated by some collective force, by all the other vampires that are taken. There are many vampires at high levels where you have a hierarchy. The stronger ones don't need to vampire anybody else. directly. They have networks for that. And they have networks that psychically have to offer them, make offerings to them. You know, the whole thing about offering to deities, sacrifices, it has a truth in it and it also has a lie in it. And the lie aspect is where you're conned into giving part of yourself to vampires who are protecting themselves as deities. And these are usually the rulers of the land or something who say, I am the land. Yeah, you could be if you were a shamanic, healthy, mature soul person, but no, you're actually the vampire of the land who is forcing everybody to give of their life force as if you were the god. The altar of the god is basically the ruler personified, and the Romans just took off all the pretenses and said, no, the emperor is the god. Okay, so go worship the emperor. So you're actually doing a physical, ritualistic act to do exactly what these high level vampires even today are doing. They have networks, and these networks have their networks, and it all goes down formally and informally into regular people making deals with the devil on a very, very small scale. Okay, that's what it does. It promises it's a kind of problem reaction solution thing where it's the hatred that causes the problem and all of your traumas. Then the hatred comes and says, okay, and you call for help and you pray, but because things are a little complicated, the good spirit cannot be heard. And that's not just the problem, is that you want relief now. You don't want to have to work for it and take lifetimes or even one lifetime or even half a one or 5 minutes. If something comes in and says, well, here's the quick fix, you're going to follow it. In any case, the important thing is that everybody gets tempted, but usually the subconscious of mature souls will brush it off. Get behind me, Satan, so to speak. You know, it's basically, no, you're in the past. And at this point, as tempted as I may be, I don't like you. And not only that, then you make this thing an enemy. And so it's open season on Jay. The vampires will be sent to feed the network. Now, you've unplugged from most of them, but there is one, and that one is the one you are speaking of. This person is not going to let go so long as the collective is tapping into them. And so long as they believe that if they let go, it's over. In any case, you are already protected. And so visualize that cat, talk to Yuki. It's Yuki the cat, okay? And talk to the cat in your imagination. Summon it like you would any familiar, because when it says, for example, something like Pursan gives familiars, or this guy gives familiars, good familiars, but they're also like, well, you're also, if you have anything there that's too subconscious to be noticed, except in a few vague dreams, we'll help bring it to the surface. Because Yuki's still there and she still wants to help. And your astral vehicle, let's say, is in good hands through rough times and where there isn't vitality there, where the vitality goes down. Because when the vitality goes down, that's when the vampires feel that your defenses are down and they will attack. So there's a kind of psychic solar element involved here, because cats are solar creatures as well. Even though here you're talking about a union between the sun and snow, in the sense of danger and stuff. It's not fiery danger, but it's a danger of like the certain rune that's called the ice rune, which is a vertical line. It's contraction. So you tried the tit for tat thing, and you're noticing that, okay, you even the score, everything was fine, there was a truce, and now here he comes again, and she wants to punch you in the nose. Because let's start it all over, because there's a voice in my head that's saying, well, we got to do this, or Jay's on the way, so I'm going to ride on this coattails, but I want the coattails for myself. You see, as good as a person is, corruption is a thing. The mature soul, as I was saying before, is the one responsible here. Now, you're talking about the dog again. The dog is another protector, and this was a protector in life. So the vampire couldn't really do as much damage when the dog was there. And grooming something is the hairs represent the energy coming out of the body, vitality. So this dog hair was essentially a reminder that he couldn't get to you. And she didn't like that. The dog, I guess, is male. So that's these other dreams that you had, these secondary ones, were essentially just ruminating about this thing. But there is this inner conflict, and you want to know the first step to take is to reconcile with Yuki because you just, you're a dog person, obviously, in some ways. But in this case, and animal lovers are animal lovers. But in this case, bring the whole essence of Yuki as a familiar, make an affirmation of not a contract officially, but a kind of affirmation, and then say you're the one in the driver's seat in the snowy roads at least. And you don't have to drive. Jay, you can let her do the drive. Maybe she's your chauffeur. Maybe that's the role. But you ask and you'll learn from that. So this can be a very enlightening experience. And apparently, this vampire is chomping at the bit and probably chomping at the bit because even though you're cordial and all of this, deep down, where none of us want to admit, because you got to be honest with yourself and have compassion for your own bad side, so to speak, the side that makes you feel guilty of feeling anything, even though you may be justified or maybe you're not. But in either case, it's like, no, still the immature part of me. I don't want to abuse it here, but it's got to be okay, sit down, relax. We're going to get through this. I'm in charge. And if it starts kicking and screaming, it goes, I'm in charge. Why don't you, what's going on here? And usually you will find another influence behind a corrupting influence, like a molesting influence that comes in and has seduced this aspect. And breaking them apart is very difficult because until you do, and you can't just chop it up, but severing the connection is difficult because until you do, it's always going to renew itself. And it will also affect even my thought process trying to relay this. So, anyways, tell us about your physical experiences and whatever other dream or symbolism you may have had in that quartzsite Arizona place that you are at.
So here I am out in the middle of the desert, and I'm at this old ghost town kind of thing. And so last night, or yesterday evening, I tune up my instruments. I'm getting ready to play. It's just kind of a ritual before the sun goes down. Get as many songs in as I can. Drink some beer, have a good time, and then boot up the internet, and then watch some YouTube, and then go to sleep. Well, yeah, that didn't happen. I played a couple of songs on my mandolin and just broke down crying. It was there. There are two times where, well, let's make this quick because I don't want to get all choked up right now. But anyway, I've only been really, really sad two times in my life. And one would be when my dad passed away, and the other would be when, let's get some water, when my dog passed away. And so let's not make this so damn personal, and let's talk about a movie. If anybody's ever seen the first Hellraiser movie, where I can't remember the actor's name, but he was in an Eastwood movie as well, Dirty Harry, the first Dirty Harry movie, where I think the killer in the show was Scorpio or something like that. And anyway, he did the Hellraiser movie, and the chain, if you remember, there was these hooks and which were attached to chains, and they just ripped him apart. And it was, I think, at the end of the movie where you just saw it, where it was like he's just being stretched, his skin's being pulled, and then all of a sudden his whole body just explodes. That is the best way I can describe the sorrow and grief that I had when my dad died. My dog was a little different. It was more guilt than anything else, but for whatever reason, there's no reason to even get into that, but it was definitely guilt-centered with my dog. With my dad, it just felt like my soul was being ripped apart. Seriously, I could not even put a coherent thought together. There was just nothing. Well, that was yesterday was very close to that. Just flipping out, unbelievable. Well, okay, I've done the best I could do to describe it, but it was like grief, sorrow, so definitely lung oriented, and there was no. I know that me and Ari have talked about before, distilling the drama away from the emotions and then slowly getting down to the core vibration of the emotion where you can do some actual healing. Ari, I know you remember that. There was none of that in this situation at all. That's just not going to, it was humanly impossible to do. What I can do with other more manageable emotions, more manageable vibrations. This was not manageable. This was like, holy hell, really? And so, okay, so there we go, Ari. And I don't know how long I'm going to be here. But this is my sound bite. I will get this to you as quickly as possible. And then you can work on next week's podcast. All right. Adios, amigos.
Thanks, Jay. That was actually pretty moving, man. I can relate. When my father died, I kind of had a similar thing, but mine was a little more distributed evenly. Well, both my parents died, and it was slightly different. It's almost like you get not quite used to it, but it's not as impacting as a shock, a first shock. But the pet, I have a dog, and I'm really, if he's going to go, I'm going to be really, really sad like that. That's natural. That's a part of releasing and letting go. What isn't natural is or healthy. It's obviously par for the course, but when you have the emotional aspect and then there's all the trauma connected with it, and then there's deeper trauma under that that's perpetuating the current issues, then it's very hard. So it presents a certain dynamic where it misleads you, purposefully or not. I'm not going to put causality into it right now, but it misleads you into feeling or thinking that you're going to have to go through this again and again and again. Or if, when you can't form attachments and you can't, something's always going to be taken from you. And that echoes the vampirism. I mean, that's what vampirism is. And it's not just you losing a possession that can be replaced or something like that. That's almost, possessions are almost like, how do you say, a reflection of that, an iteration of it. And if you let go of something and then something better comes, that's one thing. But if time and time again, when you let go of something, you're not really letting go, your hands are probably off of it and it's pulled away, or you're shocked into releasing it and it's pulled away. And every time you want to get it back, you have to confront insanity because insanity took it away. That's how you get to look at these traumas because it's an opportunity to all of these zones of losing this or losing that. It reflects a very main thing. And the dream you had of that weird female Hogwarts and your father being in it and the car that blew up and all of that stuff, you remember that. And what was it? The first or second podcast? And where it's almost like a part of you. Remember when we also said that, look, maybe it's not so useful? I don't know if it's true or not. Really, I mean, you can't really prove it. If other people are your fragments literally, or if they simply resonate your own perceived fragmentation. They are representations, in other words, just like dreams symbolize something, but whatever the symbol is empowered by that something. So are people and things and events in your environment empowered by something. And what is that essence of them? So this is why I'm making a comment here, is to be able to clarify the opportunities we have to be able to work through this, because none of us want to go through unnecessary turmoil. And I don't mean shutting down your emotions. I mean, is trauma really, that was one of my big questions across the board. I mean, is this necessary to just go through and suffer every inch of the way for every inch of redemption you manage? Or are there zones where, okay, like I said before, you actually mature, you become stronger, more effective, so your challenges are fewer, but then they increase because you're going at a deeper level. So can we accelerate to the point where we gradually decrease the amount of pain we have to go through to heal? Healing should not be painful, it should be soothing. It is to the body, and that's what the body says. The spirit seems to say otherwise, but you see, in my book, nature takes precedence. When I say nature, I mean the divine feminine, the yin, the substantiality of the field, of the womb of creation, shall we say. Spirit is cause. So spirit is the one, shall we say, at fault. I'm not blaming some divine father here, but individuated spirit is at fault. So the so-called, and I deleted a lot of these out, these little segments where I go off on tirades about evil and all of this, but it is basically your consciousness is what needs to be cleansed. And that does not require suffering. Normally, this whole zone is a part of individuation. It's supposed to be. But there's a little glitch in there that happened. But that's, again, discussion for another time. I don't want to go too far over. But right now, let's just say this, that you can individualize without trauma, and it can be organically natural. But before it becomes organically natural, it needs to become spiritually natural, spiritually normal, shall we say. So essentially, an individual coming out of spirit, distilling itself out of spirit, does not need to go insane because it does not need to go through the alienation experience. Or if it does, then there is no nature to feel it. Pure consciousness feels nothing. All it does is it sees, it is aware. It's not quite feeling, it's a different sense. If you people who are familiar with deep states of meditation, there's energy and there's sensation and there's feeling. And whenever you are asked to meditate, there's also an energy breathwork cultivation process going on. That's there for a reason, because pure consciousness can be incredibly ungrounding, and it can be incredibly destabilizing because you are not referenced where you need to be, which is manifest. We are created beings, which means we're not amorphous essence, but we contain amorphous essence. We contain all of the possibilities and all the parts and pieces of the essence that want to come together in new ways. And yet we are a core, each of us. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us the same, first of all, because we are a core of directive ambition, aspiration. And we're talking aspiration not in some intellectualized sense, but like somebody aspires to meet their soulmate or go on an adventure or have a good time. And I want to have a good time this way. And somebody is, I want to go have a good time that way. And that way, with a capital T and a capital W, becomes your way. And out of that, that is the experiences you get, or this proto essence of yourself gets, uh, form the little speck of dust that a clam swallows, and then a speck of sand that around which it grows a pearl. In fact, esoteric Christianity uses that metaphor of the pearl because it is created by a speck, a piece of dirt, a piece of earth. And that piece of earth is terrestrial experience. And around this, the terrestrial experience distilled from all your lifetimes becomes the seed of the soul, or rather the root, the let's say the germination point. Okay, the true coordinate representation, the environmental soulmate. It becomes the environmental soulmate of the soul that's emerging. That's why, in this very difficult to understand or at least explain scenario, Our wholeness, our divine wholeness, is the fusion between, or a synthesis between, an environment experience and a self experience. We are not just self, but the part of us that goes out and experiences is the individual part, the subjective, the subject, so to speak. The object part is also has awareness, and we tune into that from the individual perspective, our initiation point, as a receptive dynamic that we essentially like just love to death because it's so great. And then that feeds back in us as a really cool experience. And then once we get the hang of the feedback loop, that's how we create. And it's natural. But hatred needs to be filtered out. The residues of a dynamic where each of our potential, because we're like fragmented and coming together. And some of these fragments are like, okay, this is psychological now. I drew it so close that it's actually, I know it's part of me, but it's a fragment, and I'm very close. And then we come the relationship, the mesological, the middle ground zone, the us and them dynamic, where other people reflect that kind of thing. But once you get past that, you're moving into the archetypal, and that's where the collective is. So you see your own personal trial, and everyone on earth is part of a certain spectrum of trial, of alienation that has occurred, and the rest are essentially offshoots of that. And maybe they cannot mature, or until the other ones before them can reach a certain step to make it easier for them. I mean, in my experience, it almost seems like to get to a certain point, you cut corners and you be the trickster and make compromises and this and that and the other. And that's not good enough. But at least you get to your point, and then you go back and plug up the hole, so to speak. Yes, you can do that. You can incarnate back in time. But it's not quite what you think. In fact, what incarnates back in time is our own aspiration from a higher level. So it's not really time in a mathematical sense. It's actually another level of happening that comes down into our present. And that level of happening translates to something that would be in our future. If you don't understand it, I'm not going to delete this because it's an interesting point to kind of meditate on. Anyway, Jay, uh, you are cleansing now. So I'm going to leave you to your process. You're cleansing out the vampires. You're coming to terms with all of this. And your breath is being cleansed. You're going to reach a point where you're going to have a progression with your diaphragmatic issues. So you'll be able to release, because I got similar pains. And I got pains in my shoulders. And for me, the main point of obstacles, shall we say, is right at the base of the skull, at the jawbone. It's like a kind of, not quite a TMJ zone, but if you're into the ears and above the ears, and right where the third eye should be opening. And the problem is in the throat, and that leading to the heart. So the expression that I'm doing now is almost like an attempt to clear that pathway. It's part of my karma. I'm emphasizing it because this is the final bastion for me for full individuation. The third eye is fine. The heart is hurt. Everything else is affected, and the throat is highly compromised. It's almost like something else is using your voice. And there's a lot of strain involved, and this has to do with physical health as well. It's not that it has to do with the ability to sustain physical health. Let's put it that way. And that's a big vibration. So sometimes our core issues at level 3 are issues of the whole collective. If you resolve a level 3 issue, or if you resolve your karma at level 3, you're going to give a gift to everybody. You're going to essentially establish a certain immunity that will be able to inoculate others naturally, holographically, morphogenetically, you might say, basically everything all at once. It doesn't mean everybody's going to accept it, but it does mean that it's going to be absorbed. And it's like, well, why doesn't one person do that? Why didn't some Jesus guru guy, whatever, do that? Well, they don't access all of that. they have to personally go through all of this karma themselves. See, that's what I mean. Through the whole human collective dynamic at level 3, and it's almost like, so I got to suffer because the human collective doesn't want to go through this. Okay, let's see. Oh, these people think that they're going to have to suffer far more because and that's why there's so much of a tribulation. In society today. But there are people I know that have fundamental essences. Jay is one of them that span over level 3 coherence, meaning that at level 3 it exists, whereas somebody else is passive. There is no level 3. It's just a complete. They can't make sense of it, rhyme or reason. Only through some dreams, only through vague stuff, especially when they're repressing feelings. So they don't discern individuality at level 3. Jay does subconsciously discern individuality at level 3. Sorry about talking in the third person here, Jay, but I'm signed out after all. So we're going to get into all of this. This is beyond therapy, folks, and I hope I didn't bore you with all of the extras. I can't help but get into existential exegesis, existential eschatology, shall we say, existential um, dramas, creation dramas, and transformation dramas, and redemption dramas. That is what alchemy is all about, because the language of archetypes is the easiest way to access level 3 at the mental and intellectual, uh, you know, awareness frame. At the emotional level, we need to connect those together. That's why fantasy work is popular. It's always been, but now there's a lot of weirdness going on in modern media and the presentations and all of that. So that's a tale for some whole other zone, not here. Anyways, one more comment. Distilling the drama from the emotions. Yes, Jay, as I grew older, I realized that was easier said than done. There are levels where you cannot distill the drama from the emotion. It's too real. You can do that. It's best if you learn to do that at levels you can handle. But the whole thing is that I find that to be the boundary. That is, and that's why this is my final statement for this podcast. That is what we are out to do at a fundamental level, from a psychological to a relationship level to a level 3 and a transcendent level. We need to take the drama outside of it. The story is not what it's about. The story is what it's about when it is unafflicted. Because if we turn our trauma into a story, we need that, of course, to understand it at every level and to leave no stone unturned. But if we perpetually dramatize our trauma, then other thoughts come in and keep expanding on the story. And then it twists and becomes corrupt and distorted and rots and turns into a worst case scenario. And that's what's going on in the world or threatening to go on. So if you start removing the drama from the story and say, okay, I define that as the limit of my transformation. I can transform anything as long as I can take the drama out of it. And that might mean reaching a point of being alone for a while and then reconstituting. But I've been there. I don't want to go through it again. There's no reason for it. But if there is a reason, well, I will go through it again. It's not like I'm going to give up. That is not an option. This is a perpetual conscious, we're becoming conscious of something going on all the time, our evolution. But when it becomes conscious, time changes. We reach the 2012 Mayan factor, end of days thing at a personal level. And so, but that means we're creating a whole new calendar for ourselves, a whole new timeline, shall we say. Let's call it a timeline. And we do this, and that doesn't mean it's going to start out great. It's going to mean that this timeline is defined by a commitment to address everything that couldn't be addressed before, wouldn't be addressed in order to bring back the level of nature suffering. And when I say nature, I include animal nature, plant nature, bio nature, all of that, um, all material nature, all of energy nature, everything receptive and feeling, including human nature. So what's left? Well, consciousness. I separate consciousness and nature, just like they do in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, there are two main dynamics. One of them is prakriti, or prakrati, but technically prakriti, which is nature. That's it. Nature, the world, our nature. And then the other one is purusha. And purusha is the person, the subject, you, me. But everything I see is still prakriti, your prakriti for me to a certain point, unless I can tune in enough that the personhood becomes obvious. And humans have that. They're able to sustain a separation, but their personhood becomes obvious. And that personhood can connect to anything and sustain itself because it is the true divine coming out of a point outward and cycling into a reality and then moving back in. So it forms a kind of toroidal motion. But I'll leave you with that geometric metaphor for now because we don't want to go too far. There's too much to talk about. I'm really looking forward to your next soundbite and how you've processed all that. So we'll give that a week, folks. And Jay sent this to me today, and I am sending it out ASAP. I got on it, and well, that's it. So tune in to whatever bat time we got, but it's the same bat station, that's for sure. So with that, adios, amigos, and Magus out.